Hey everyone, it's Michael here, the host of the Heavy Hockey Podcast. My interview today is with Dale Sheehan, the International Center and Sports Security Director of Sport Integrity. It was a great interview, and we cover off the potential for match fixing in the sport of hockey, an area that is, of course, quite relevant to us here at Heavy Hockey. Hope you enjoy the interview. Don't forget, April 6th, in support of autism, we are playing the Oilers Live Cup in Calgary at the Max Bell Center. Get your details at oilers.live.
From Section 204, Heavy Hockey Podcast with Michael and guests. Heavy hockey isn't dead. It's just getting started.
Hi, this is Michael from the Heavy Hockey Podcast, and today is my guest. I've got a gentleman that works for the Sport Integrity Unit of the ICSS. It's a little bit of a longer name, so I'm going to get Dale to kind of give us an idea. His name's Dale Sheehan. And Dale, can you give us an idea of your role with the ICSS, what it does, and maybe just a quick introduction of yourself?
Good morning, Michael, and thank you very much. Yes, my name is Dale Sheehan, and I'm a director with the Sport Integrity Unit of the International Center of Sports Security. It is an independent international organization that is fighting to uphold integrity in sport in all terms of potential manipulation and corruption. It's based out of Doha in Qatar with offices worldwide, and I have done previously work with them through my work with the as an assistant commissioner with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada, and I'm currently doing sport integrity work with them.
Perfect. And you are based in Canada, in Ottawa. That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And Dale, the reason that you and I got connected was I saw that you had helped publish and co-edit a book on match fixing in football, or soccer to us Canadians, and it had me interested in how this might apply to hockey. There's lots of there's not very much information about that in terms of hockey, and I thought maybe today we could talk about a couple things in terms of match fixing in general, and maybe the application to hockey, and some of the things you're doing with the ICSS.
Certainly, I think Michael. First of all, you have to start off with you should start off with the basic premise that no sport is immune from match fixing or match manipulation. Full stop. It's been proven and documented. So I think that anybody that sits back and thinks that their sport is immune or completely safe is being very, very careless.
Excellent. And not excellent. Obviously, we want to, as fans of the game, we certainly want to know that what we're watching is real, that everybody's put in their honest effort. I looked a little bit at because match fixing in football or in soccer is a pretty big deal. I mean, we're talking not in the couple matches, we're talking in the hundreds of matches, and not just lower div teams. There's been my understanding, some high profile games, some World Cup qualifiers, Euro Cup qualifiers. So not any particular group has been immune in football. I guess I want to know, like, when a match is fixed, is it typically what precipitates that? I mean, is it are players being extorted, or is it officials generally? Is there any sort of one thing that kind of precipitates match fixing?
Well, there's so many different factors that can be considered. Usually, and most often, it's financial, of course. It's the involvement of organized crime. It is, as you indicated, the potential threats against a player. Some of these players in football, in particular, are approached and groomed at a very young age. And as time goes on and they work their way through the system, there are all kinds of factors to consider, including youth trafficking in sport, where they basically own the player. And once you're in, then that's basically means that you're owned by them. So although in hockey it might be a little bit more of a difficult game to fix, it certainly doesn't make it immune. But there's so many factors to consider because it's no longer the traditional betting on the outcome of a game or fixing the outcome of a game. It's all components of a game. Betting, illegal betting and legal betting now with the internet are betting on anything and everything in a game. The first player to touch a ball, the first player to kick a ball out of bounds, the first person in hockey that gets a penalty, the first person that ices the puck. All components of the game are bet. So quite often, you'll see a player in any sport be approached to commit a minor infraction, such as icing the puck or kicking a ball out of bounds, and they'll play on that by saying you're not affecting the outcome of the game. Mm-hmm. You're not fixing the game. You're not losing the game. You're just doing one small little infraction, and we'll pay you, for example, $50,000. The danger of that is once that's accepted, now they've got you. And that's where the blackmailing and the threatening comes in afterwards.
Now, you brought up something. It would appear that it's mostly syndicates that do this. This is an organized crime thing for the most part, or is this something that is perpetrated by some one-offs, or is it mostly primarily a syndicate kind of problem?
Organized crime, anywhere there's a chance to make money, organized crime will play a role in it. And sport regulations in terms of governance are not necessarily strongly enforced. It's very difficult to enforce. In terms of law enforcement, it's certainly an incredibly different and difficult area to enforce. So, but there are numerous cases, hundreds of cases of where it's just an individual thing. It could start with betting your father asking for a favor for a bet in a bar. So it can go from very, very small to massive amounts of money.
Now, you being based in Canada, obviously hockey is a tradition and almost a religion here. But the ICSS is an international organization based in Doha. What do you have? Is hockey even on the radar for you?
Well, all sports are on the radar for us, and I can give you two examples. That stand out in hockey, and although they're not in the top tier league, it demonstrates to your audience that no sport is immune. So first in Denmark, where 3 players were suspended in their top league. Now that's the top league of a country. Many of them are drafted into the NHL, and those 3 players were suspended when it was determined that the match was played to a completely or partially predetermined result. So you're seeing this happen in upper leagues in other countries, and that's part of what is a grooming area and a potential area that could enter into the North American NHL hockey. Secondly, in an IIHF game, Ukraine versus Korea, where the game was fixed to lose by at least 3 goals. So as sport becomes more international, and as hockey certainly becomes more international, there are more of an international influence that could potentially creep into the game that you've seen happen in other sports. That said, ice hockey, for example, by the European Sports Security, is only one of 27 cases reported, where tennis would be 12, football 4, volleyball 4, etc. Now, those statistics, the ICSS has set up an Integrity Counts hotline. And that hotline is basically an independent hotline where people, athletes, referees, judges, audiences, they can report in if there's suspicious activity, basically to an independent international entity. In the last year, we've set this up for 1 year, but in the last year, the ICSS has had 165 cases reported. 165 cases. Now, out of that, the large majority, you are correct, are football or soccer, as you call it in Canada, but also tennis, handball, karate. There are internal reports of Olympic corruption, etc. So there are cases that have been reported where people, athletes, indeed police officers and judges have exhausted all avenues in trying to report and gone up against corruption in their systems or ignorance and defiance. And they've gone to an international entity. When this hotline was set up, we did not have any idea of the magnitude, whether we would have 1 case, 10 cases, or 50 cases. But the success, and I say success in an unfortunate way, the success of the International Integrity Counts hotline with over 165 cases demonstrates that there is a need for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's based in Vancouver, that hotline, right?
Yes, the platform is based. It's an international hotline. It's based out of Vancouver, and the website is integritycounts.ca.
Okay, so I think there's something though you touched on, which is that if there is match fixing going on in hockey, which there's some likelihood that it's happened or probably happened, I would guess. And you're saying it could be something like just taking a penalty or something in game that really doesn't affect the outcome of the game too much. So why should we care? I mean, it's just a game of hockey. The outcome's not affected. Why should we care?
Well, I think first of all, my personal belief is sports are the very fabric of our community. They are what teach our youth about teamwork, safety, partnering, competitions, fairness. And if that is manipulated, and if you just recall back to the Ben Johnson situation with Canada and the Olympics, and you saw the country go from such a high to such a low within 24 hours, that's why we care. The country are emotionally invested in their athletes and in all sports. Therefore, the onus is you expect when you put your heart and soul into something, as well as your financial dollars to support through tickets and purchases and sweaters and uniforms, you expect that to have a fair outcome and a fair competition. And part of the issue when you're dealing with that is you do become emotionally involved. If you follow the NHL and you follow the NHL across Twitter and the different fan bases across this country, you will see that it is such a passion. In some cases, they even refer to it as a religion. And it would be simply devastating if you found out at the end of a championship game in North America or anywhere in the world that the outcome was fixed. You can just imagine the devastation for the sport, as well as the devastation and the emotional impact on the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even for myself, I'm heavily invested as a fan in the game. It would certainly affect me at some level. I think that when we talk about hockey, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that, what do you think the risk is to the game and to the integrity of the game when the NHL, goes into gambling partnerships and moves into markets like Las Vegas? Do you think this increases the exposure to match fixing, or does it matter at all?
Well, I mean, you're talking two different entities. Certainly, there is a bona fide reasons to have legalized and monitored and controlled betting and gambling. It's not necessarily just the legal betting that can cause issues. It's the illegal market. And the illegal market, there are estimates that it's 4, 5, 6 times higher than the legal market. Oh, wow. So the more regulations that you have in place and the more safeties you have in place, the better it is to monitor. The 4 professional sport leagues in North America have integrity units for the most part and security units. They do monitor irregularities in all of their matches, and they are investigated and followed up accordingly. But again, it's no longer just the outcome of a game. It might be any type of insider information in hockey. It could be referees, players, coaches, trainers. All components of a game can provide inside information or intelligence that can facilitate financial gain. Who's playing tonight? Who's sitting out tonight? Who's injured? Those are all factors that are being bet on as well. And I think there might be a misconception that people are only betting $20 to see whether Montreal beats Toronto tonight.
I'd bet on that.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. That does bring up some interesting thoughts. I mean, that's still, when I reached out to you, I'm thinking about match fixing. I'm thinking about the outcome of a game or just the spread. I'm not considering the fact that, you brought it up, it could be a penalty or it could be, anything, some inside information on an injury. Now you did say, so each of the four major leagues in North America have some type of a unit that's dedicated to this. NHL, I assume, is included in that.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's for all components of integrity and security in sport, and you'll see most sports. You do see examples of, for example, tennis, where there have been several allegations of corruption or match fixing that have occurred, and there is an international tennis integrity unit that follows those up. At the ICSS, we partner with those entities, and if there's information that can facilitate some information, we certainly would pass that on. The World Anti-Doping Association for doping in sport, those are all part of unfair competition. So it's not just match fixing, it's what advantages or disadvantages there are that could allow you to perform beyond your ability to influence the outcome of a game. So doping is a perfect example. And all of those are regularly monitored, as well as the betting patterns are monitored. And if there's irregularities in betting patterns, those are followed up and investigated. And the true success of this is an integrated international partnership. I worked with Interpol, and Interpol also had worked with the ICSS in regards to an international partnership to ensure that communication and partnerships about sharing information, it's integral to the success of working together. So individuals that think that they can do it all alone or be the sole solution to such a problem are living in a fantasy world, quite frankly, because you must have cooperation and integration to make this put a best foot forward.
Yes. So is this the kind of thing that an integrity unit, say, of the NHL, where it's possible that they have found something that could have happened and they wouldn't release that? I mean, it seems to me that with the amount of games that have happened in the NHL, that this has not ever happened. I mean, we know of, there was Operation Slapshot that goes back quite a ways with Rick Tocchet and Janet Jones or Janet Gretzky. But they were asked if they were gambling on hockey and they said no, and that was to be believed at the time. Whether or not that's the truth or not, I can't say. But with all of the games that we've had in hockey, I can't recall an actual case in the NHL where some type of where the integrity of the game was questioned. Anything that you're aware of, or do you think it's happened?
To my knowledge, you're correct. There hasn't been anything that has been publicly acknowledged. Whether or not there have been investigations or innuendos or allegations, I'm not sure whether the NHL would answer it. It might be a proper question to ask them, their security or their intelligence areas to see. But to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any situations currently in the NHL.
And is a league like the NHL, do you think, of particular risk because it flies under the radar like that? Or, is it something as a fan, we can sort of be confident that the right, safeties are in place today? And we can be, those two are independent questions of each other. But do you think the NHL is at risk of this? Or I assume as we get more sophisticated in our ability to monitor gambling and other forms of match fixing, that as well, the syndicates and the crime organizations, they get more sophisticated. Do you think that the NHL is at a high risk?
Well, as I've said, I'm an optimist, but I'm an optimist that carries an umbrella. And I personally don't think that any of the major sporting entities in North America are sitting on their laurels. I truly do believe that they are aware of issues of integrity in sport and that they do take proactive action. Most of them have prevention, education, and training programs for athletes and for employees of organizations, for associates of the sporting organizations. That said, I go back to what I originally stated. No sport is immune, and it's not something that you can just sit back and say, there, we put on a training session, everything is okay now. The prevention and education component must never stop.
Yeah. And so that, that brings up something for those that are listening. What is it that, we can do as hockey parents and hockey fans in terms of, providing, whether it's our kids or our friends, providing them a means to maybe stop this or create better awareness of integrity in sport? What are some of the things we can do?
Well, it's like all issues in sport, and that is talking about it and prevention and education. Much like sexual abuse in sport that we have seen recently across Canada, or harassment in sport, or fair play, the parents and the coaches and they certainly do have an obligation, and they should be looking after the well-being of their child. Again, it is such a passion in Canada that sometimes some things are overlooked because of the strong desire to have your child succeed and don't make waves in sport. So we have seen examples overseas where youth in high schools, there is betting in high school sports internationally, in minor league sports internationally. Our Integrity Counts hotline has cases of youth being approached at a very young age for match manipulation and in sport trafficking, and this would follow their career. So that may not have advanced in hockey in North America at the speed of which it is advancing in other countries, in other sports, but that certainly doesn't mean that we can't be aware of that and that these issues have to have a preventative method to it.
So, and of course, you have brought up, in terms of integrity in sports, doping is also probably high on your radar. Of course, there's a lot of, or seemingly seems to be a lot of awareness and discussion around that. That seems to be the easy one. This other, and I've been focusing on the match fixing because I find it interesting, but certainly doping, I guess, is probably within your purview.
Yes, certainly. On the Integrity Counts hotline, we have received numerous cases of allegations of doping, and which again is a part of a match manipulation, and we have dealt with those accordingly with the various partners and authorities.
Yeah. So when if somebody were to call into the hotline, say for some type of NHL occurrence that may or may not happen, what is it that would be the next step? What does the ICSS do with that information? Is it just dealing with local authorities, or do they deal directly with the league? How does something like that happen?
Well, the first thing we do is we have a risk matrix that we utilize. Due diligence has to be done on every investigation. It could be a case of sour grapes. It could be a false rumor. It could be one player stating something against another player, hoping that they get cut so they can get the position on the team. Yep. So the basic due diligence has to be done to ensure that the allegation has some merit. At that point in time, we would check with the rapporteur to obtain as much information as possible. And then we would look at the potential avenues of follow-up, and that would include, if required, law enforcement, international sporting organizations, and partners that would assist, that are also responsible for those various entities.
Yeah. Excellent. So, Dale, I think, we've kind of covered all of the things in terms of hockey, and I want to thank you for being here today and talking with me. I find this very, very interesting. It's an interesting topic, and one that, I think for a very long time in hockey, we, and it kind of speaks to our mentality in Canada. That kind of happens everywhere else but here. It's almost like a small town mentality, but as a country, I think that this is something we should be uniquely aware of as the game of hockey seemingly grows. This year there was of course, one player was suspended for 20 games for illegal doping in hockey. So I guess from an integrity standpoint, that kind of thing is necessary. Do you have any thoughts that you kind of want to leave us with in terms of how it applies to hockey? Anything that we didn't cover today?
Well, I dare say your listeners are going to be intrigued by this, because the initial response would be that could never happen in hockey and it's impossible. And I think through conversations such as this and awareness and some examples of what has happened and what the definition of match fixing or match manipulation is, that hockey fans might sit back and think about some things that they may have seen or heard. And they're definitely welcome to contact the Integrity Counts hotline. But also it opens up people's minds. And that's the key to success, is like millions of other Canadians, I'm a very passionate hockey fan. So sometimes you do have the tendency to have blinders on, thinking everything is perfect. But it could be something as simple as a goalie's family receives a phone call and is threatened before a game saying, if you don't let in 3 goals, something will happen to your family. And that goalie can let in 3 goals and not affect the outcome of a game. However, you can see where that starts. So I think that the awareness and through conversations like the one that you just initiated are a good thing. It's a healthy thing, and people shouldn't be passionate on one side or the other. They should keep an open mind to this and realize that it has happened in hockey, and the potential is there. And through programs such as this, hopefully we can not necessarily eliminate, but prevent it as much as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dale. So just for the listeners out there, I will, in the show notes, I'll put some links to some of the hockey cases. In fact, there was also some suspicion around a game in the KHL just this last season as well. I'll put a link to that. As well as the Ukrainian and the Denmark match-fixing cases, some information about Operation Slapshot, and, of course, the phone number for the hotline for anybody who wants to go in there. And I think, as well for the listeners, and I'm sure Dale, with his years of experience with policing, could tell you, is that these crime syndicates and organized crime syndicates, while they might be making money off of gambling, are quite often involved in a number of other illegal and very socially damaging activities like human trafficking and other things. So whether it's just the mental piece of hockey that affects you, I think we should all be aware that it doesn't just stop there. Of course, lives are actually ruined by these folks, and so it's an important thing. Dale, I want to thank you and the ICSS for doing the work that you do. It sounds like from what I've been able to read prior to talking to you today, that this is a great organization that continues to grow and do things like the hotline and other things. We're happy to have you as a part of that, as a Canadian representative, and really appreciate it. One last thing. You said you're a hockey fan, of course, being in Canada. I know most of my listeners are Oilers fans, so I know you're based in the East. Who's your team?
Well, I would have to say my heart and soul, having been born in Montreal, would be the Habs. At this point in time, I know that yourself as an Oiler fan, you've experienced a disappointing season, and I certainly have living in Ottawa as a Senators fan.
Yeah.
So I'm at the point right now where I would just love to see a Canadian team go all the way. It's time to bring it back to Canada.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us today, Dale.
Thank you very much, Michael.